Well, welcome. I'm Julian Bird, the Chief Executive of SOLT and UK Theatre, and this is the latest in a whole series of webinars to try and keep people in the industry up to speed on what is going on at the moment. For those of you that haven't been on this before, or as a reminder, down the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A button. If you click on that, you can ask me a question in real time. And at the end, I will come back and answer some of those questions. Thank you. A few people have sent questions in advance. I'm going to try and cover all of those off in what I say. But if I don't fully answer your question, please pop it back down there for the end. If you want to ask a question anonymously, you can tick that box. And I assure you, we don't know who has asked that question. So what am I going to cover today? A sort of bit of update on where I think we are, what we're expecting this week. Bit more on those support schemes from the government and the latest news on both of those. There's a small update on each of the main schemes and to answer some of the questions we've had in advance on those. I'm going to talk about some of the other funding mechanisms, other organisations out there that have funds or grants available. Talk a little bit about work that's going on with our local MP and with other bits of government. Talk to you about how you can access the latest information at any one time easily. I'm going to cover a bit of union stuff and answer questions and talk a little bit about all that charity work as well. There's lots of people on this. Just to say that this call is obviously a complete amalgamation of people from different interest groups, if you like, from freelancers, suppliers, small companies, and agents, casting agents, all sorts of casting directors, all sorts of people. So I'm sort of bearing in mind as I'm saying, I'm going to try and talk to everybody. So just a little bit of an update. Where are we at the moment? Well, you will be aware that for West End, so the main West End theatres have announced performances are cancelled at least until the 31st of May now. We would anticipate a further announcement around the West End to come in the not too distant future. Regionally, of course, it's all very different. Very sadly, last week, the Edinburgh Festivals announced they won't be happening this year, and several other theatres obviously have started to announce their own closure periods or production closures, and particularly for regional producing theatres, obviously that has to happen some way ahead. Obviously tonight, we're here on Thursday, this evening at the 5 p.m. Press conference or around then, we are expecting a formal announcement on the lockdown continuing, and linked with that, potentially either today or tomorrow, some announcements around finance measures. I'm going to come on and talk about those two schemes and why we're expecting news on both of those coming up. So obviously, I talked to you today. Over the coming days, there might be updates on quite a bit of this. And I said right at the end, after questions, I'll come on and talk about what I think the long term looks like and what we're seeing around the world and things like that on how we potentially come out of this. So let me just cover the two main government support schemes that there are at the moment. So first of all, the job retention scheme. So this is the scheme for people who work for an organisation and get paid through the PAYE scheme. And as a reminder, your employer can claim 80% of an employee's salary up to a maximum of £2,500 per month, and you have to be furloughed by your organisation in order to claim that. That's obviously enabled lots of people, lots of organisations to keep people on their books, keep them employed, but apply to the government for that money. Well, yesterday evening it was announced that the date that you had to be on your organisation's PAYE books was the 19th of March now, not the end of February. You had to be on the 19th of March or before, but there is a sting in the tail of that. It's not quite as simple as that. Your organisation also has to have notified HM Treasury through, it's called an RTI submission, it's a real-time submission, that employee was on the books by that date. So the date has been moved later to encompass more people, including seasonal workers who started in March and other people. So the 19th of March, but your organisation had to have notified HMT through that RTI submission by that date. The second big scheme is, of course, the self-employed scheme. So a very swift reminder on that. That is for people who fill in a self-employment tax form. And to qualify for this, you have to have filled in the return for the 2018-19 tax year. If you haven't, but you worked in 18-19, you still have a week or two to fill that in. So please don't forget to do that. And the government will be in touch, and you will potentially get back an average from the last 3 years, or just from that 18-19 year, once again up to £2,500 a month. For both these schemes, they are at the moment for the months of March, April, and May, so for the 3 months. On the self-employed scheme, we had several questions in advance of this. When do you apply? Well, the answer is you need to do nothing at the moment. The government originally said they would be in touch through HMRC with people who had filled in those forms in June. As of today, that has moved to mid-May. No more detail than mid-May, but at least it appears to have come forward. So we would expect HMRC to start contacting self-employed people from mid-May onwards. And as I said, as soon as we have information about that, we will let you all know, and I'll tell you how we're going to get this kind of information to you going forward. We've also had several questions around, are you allowed to work and still qualify for that self-employment money? And the answer is absolutely yes. So the self-employment money relates back to your previous work. As I said, you have to have been working in the 18-19 year. They absolutely, people are working. We had a question about, can I go and work in my local supermarket and still claim under that self-employment scheme? Yes, is the answer. We understand you absolutely can. Obviously, in this tax year, so 2020-21, when you come to fill in your return, you'll have to claim all the money you've earned in that year, including that grant money under the self-employed scheme from the government. Now, there are many issues still outstanding on these two schemes, which we are busy talking about. I was on a phone call with the Minister at DCMS only at lunchtime, including most of these. So let me just run through some of the big ones very quickly. There is a huge issue still around people who employ themselves as companies or run their business as companies. I think the statistic is there's 3.5 million one-person companies in the UK, and a lot of people who do that pay themselves a very small amount of money as a wage and pay the majority to themselves as dividends. That is an issue at the moment under the schemes. Government are aware of that. The self-employed scheme, as I said, obviously relates to an 18-19 tax year. So anyone who has entered the market as a self-employed person since then is currently not eligible. It's a huge worry to us, including all the people who graduated from college last summer. There is an issue with some people falling through the gaps, because for the self-employed scheme, you have to generate at least 50% of your income through self-employment, and some people do a mix of PAYE and self-employed work. That mixture is complicated, and so some people are falling through the gaps on schemes. I've mentioned that the seasonal workers thing, we hope, has been mainly picked up now. These are people who started in March. And then the other big two issues that still remain on the self-employed scheme, the cliff edge at sort of 50,000. So if your net profit at the end of your form is over 50,000, you will not qualify for the scheme. And particularly that's an issue in London for people who work here as well as elsewhere in the country. We're arguing rather strongly for some form of taper there after 50,000 rather than a straight, you get nothing. And finally, to anticipate a question we may get later, which we do not have the answer for, which is how do you deal with leave, annual leave? How do you deal with holiday for people who are furloughed? And the answer is we don't know yet. We are waiting for HM Treasury to and HMRC to rule on that, which we hope will be soon. You may also know, if you're a company, that HMRC have announced that the portal for the job retention scheme is due to open next Monday now for you to notify about your furloughed employees and to claim those payments next Monday. Now, obviously, on both these schemes, as I said, are currently for March, April and May. One of the big issues on that is, if the lockdown gets extended, will these schemes also be extended? And that's what we're going to be watching for very closely tonight. And obviously, so far, we've had a one economy approach to all these schemes. So this applies across every sector of the economy. Going forward, will that work? Or are we looking to certain sectors to be able to continue with schemes like this from the government for longer than others? As we firmly, obviously, now understand that when lockdown is over and things start to be relaxed, that will happen sector by sector in the economy. So just because certain sectors are open and able to work again, doesn't necessarily mean that others will be able to. And so things like the theatre industry and the arts, we are arguing very strongly that we will need these support mechanisms in place for a lot longer time. As I said, I can answer any more questions on those government schemes when we get to questions in a moment or two, but let me just talk about some of the other things. And as I said, I apologise, some of this will be relevant to some of you, but not to all of you. So I'm going to rattle through the main funding bodies for the arts in the UK have now all published what they are doing. So the Arts Council of England, first of all, have a scheme for individuals who are artists or do arts practice, where you can claim apply for up to £2,500, and for organisations that are not national portfolio organisations, so those that don't get regular funding from the Arts Council, you can apply for up to £35,000. Tranche 1 of that has closed, but tranche 2 opens on the 16th, that's today. And you must register your interest in applying either as an individual or as a non-MPO by the 27th of April and fill your application in by the 30th of April. Their announcement on their National Portfolio Organisation scheme is due, I understand, on Monday now, so we will be looking at that then. In Wales, the Arts Council of Wales have announced a £7 million response fund, £1.5 million for individuals. So once again, if you're an individual, you can apply to that. That scheme is open. And a £5 million scheme for organisations. And that stabilisation fund, as they are calling it, for organisations will open on the 21st of April. And then there will be another fund for individuals that will come at the end of May. Don't worry if you're not getting all this detail. As I said, I'll tell you where you can get access to all of this in a moment. Creative Scotland have announced 3 funds if you're based in Scotland. One for screen, I'm not going to talk about, but one for individuals, a £2 million bridging bursary fund, not a loan, fund for grants, where you can apply for anything from £500 to £2,500. And then a scheme for organisations of £7.5 million, where you can apply for up to £50,000. Both those schemes are already open if you're in Scotland. The Arts Council of Northern Ireland haven't announced any major new funds that we understand, but are being flexible with some of their other funding, and that details are all available on their website. The final one, the 5th big thing to talk about, is the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the old Heritage Lottery Fund, slightly renamed. If you work in or around a heritage building or a heritage context, they have a heritage emergency fund of £50 million. And if you've had funding from them before, you can apply for that. The main fund is over the next 3 to 6 months to provide some short-term funding to help stabilise your operation and manage risks. You can apply for between £3,000 and £50,000, and then they've said they are going to fund a very select number of key strategic investments where heritage is identified as the biggest risk. We understand there will be a very small number of those key heritage things that they will fund. So as I said, there's a lot of information about the government schemes, all the things the government are announcing, all those from arts funding bodies. We have now, in conjunction with the government, been able to pull together on both our websites in the public area. So this is available for everybody in the theatre industry, a list of links that will take you directly to the information on all these different schemes. So they're on both our websites, uktheatre.org and SOLT.co.uk. Please do go and use those there. We will keep updating those. And just to say, please do keep going back to those to get the link to the latest information. Those government websites in particular are changing quite regularly. But if you keep going back to those live links, you will always be at the right place with the latest information. And as I said, as we hear of new schemes or new things, we will continue to update those web pages. So uktheatre.org and salt.co.uk. One thing we've talked about very much on these webinars before is the whole issue around business rates and the Chancellor's announcement about a business rate exemption holiday, if you like, for leisure businesses, which, as we know, as that has played out through DCLG down to each local authority, that has become very much about venues themselves. We continue to argue the case around that. Nikki Aitken, the MP for the cities of London and Westminster, is very much working with us on that. She has been lobbying behind the scenes and has also now written a big public letter about the issue of business rates, both on that definition to make sure that the whole ecology is able to have that exemption, which also means some would be eligible for grants as well. But also she's arguing quite strongly about the rateable level of 51,000 for London, in particular her constituency, where 51,000 is a rateable value for a very, very small business now. On unions, I'm not going to say too much, but let me just say that SOLT and UK Theatre, we've basically reached agreement with the unions on most things now. You'll have heard about the agreement on the West End between SOLT and Equity to give some certainty on both sides in a period of complete uncertainty, I would say. So it gives flexibility on both sides. If people have individual questions about that, that's very much one you should talk with your producer, general manager about. And if necessary, then they will talk with Wayne and our employment relations team. But the aim is to give a bit of certainty in a very uncertain world there to both sides. Before I do questions, let me just say that obviously we still know that there's a huge amount of uncertainty out there. We know people are falling through the gaps. We know that not all the schemes are picking everybody up. And just to remind you, we have pulled together all the information about the charities in the sector that are able to help and support you at that website, theatresupport.info, theatresupport.info. And that also includes all the details of the theatre helpline that's available 24/7 for anybody in the theatre industry. We've been having as many calls to that per week as we normally have per month. So it's very much being used, and it is there for anybody in the theatre industry, whether you work in it now or you used to work in it. Or whether you're live working or not at the moment, it is there for you. Please do use it for anything you need help with. Okay, I'm going to take some questions, and then at the end, after questions, I'm going to come and talk about some of the work we're doing about the long-term sector, about the long-term feel of where we think the sector is going. Do I know if the grant for self-employed people will take the 1920 tax year into account? The answer is no, it will not at the moment. It is purely about 1819, just to say. I think a second question around that, about the grant for years 16 to 19, which is the 3 years they're looking at, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, versus 17 to 20 will be very different for me and many others. And yes, we have fed that, we appreciate that, and we are talking to them, particularly as you know, about the new entrants who would only have done a 19-20 year, but at the moment they're saying to us it's for fraud risks, that it is based on the years 16 to 19 on self-employment. I understand that for some people that will cause an issue because they've earned more in later years than in those previous years. The question, good to hear the government are aware of those falling down the cracks. Are they making any signs that they plan to fill them and help out? Yes, I mean, I'm in pretty constant contact on some of this. I think they are worried about the people who fall down the cracks really genuinely, and particularly those who do a bit of PAYE and a bit of self-employment, and they understand that's a big issue. They're very worried about the new entrants, and I do genuinely believe that. The question is, how do we do that? And there's another question about being a recent graduate. We are trying to work with them to see if they can come up with a scheme for those new entrants into the market. So I do believe that they are genuinely looking at all of those. One of the gaps, the cracks, if you like, with those seasonal workers, that managed to get solved yesterday with the announcement about, or some people about the announcement of the move to the 19th of March instead of the 28th of April. So I can't guarantee we'll get anywhere, but all I can tell you is there's a lot of work going on both of those. My organisation is working out furlough average pay over the last tax year. 52 weeks as a casual worker. I haven't worked 52 weeks in my case, close to 20 across the year, yet my employer is still working out my average over 52 weeks. Well, that is what the guidance says. The average says to average over the last year. I guess the question is, it's quite hard to know with this individual. If you're a part-time worker but have worked part of all 52 weeks, that would be right. Potentially, if you've only worked for 20 of the 52 weeks, I think you should go back and have a conversation with your employer to see if there's anything they can do about that. Remember, this is organisations who are claiming this money from the government, so they shouldn't lose out on paying you correctly, but just ask them. A question, do I think there's any help from the government for agencies who currently have no income? So the answer is, at the moment, not a lot. For agencies that have their own business and pay business rates, we're trying to get that resolved, as you know, so we very much put on the list theatrical agencies, casting directors, warehouses, workshops and stuff. We are putting that on the list, and that's why that definition is so important, because if that's the case, you'll be eligible potentially for a grant from the government as well as a small business. So we're working quite hard to try and make sure that you will be eligible for that. I raised that very clearly and vociferously with the minister at lunchtime again, to say it's quite frustrating we haven't seen anything move on. Apart from that, which would mean you could get access to a grant as a small business, no business rates. There isn't a lot more. You know that there's a postponement of VAT and all those kind of things which might help you. Apart from that, you can furlough your employees, obviously, or the self-employment scheme. Beyond that, no, do look at those charities if you are really struggling, is what I would say. And once again, if I can do anything quietly to help, then do email me direct and I will try and help you individually. Question, surely have you recently registered for self-assessment tax in the last year but have not yet submitted a claim? The claim would not be fraudulent. We've now completed and submitted our 1920 self-assessment and hope they might take this into consideration at some point. They may at some point. Unfortunately, at the moment, they are being really clear about 1819. They are being pushed by us and many, many, many other people around the new entrance to the market and the 1920 year. We may see a change on that. I know there is work going on literally as we speak about it. We have fed in quite a lot of ideas and thoughts into that process. As soon as we have any information, I promise you we are lobbying hard on your behalf on the whole self-employed basis. Oh, there's quite a technical question. So if an employee is on a part-time 30-hour contract and was temporarily increased to 37 hours and was due to go back to those contracted 30 hours, would you pay them the 80% as per the February PAYE, or should you pay them? I don't know the answer specifically to that. I would suggest you have a look at the guidance in specifically around that, and whether you feel you need to average back over the last year or whether you can just take the February PAYE and pay. I'm afraid I can't answer that question specifically. A question, can you still work if you're being furloughed? If you're being furloughed under the job retention scheme, then the answer is you are not allowed to work for the organisation that you are being furloughed from. You're not allowed to volunteer for them, you're not allowed to work for them. You can volunteer for other organisations. Volunteer for other organisations. That doesn't mean you can go and work for them, but it means you can volunteer for them. So I hope that's clear as well. But you cannot do any work for the organisation that you have been furloughed from. You can't do any work, any volunteering for them. They're being very, very clear and specific about that. Question, do we have any information support for businesses and small business owners looking at bankruptcy? It is something we could put in place. We have not done that yet. I'm going to make a note straight away. We are looking at issues around going concern and all of that for people as well. But we will also see what we can do around bankruptcy rules and help as well. As I said, the offer is there if anyone wants to talk to us, please do, and we will see what we can do individually to try and help you. Obviously, we can't guarantee, but we will try and do what we can. Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the next stage of this. So obviously there's much discussion in the newspapers and in the media around what's next, and particularly what's next for mass gatherings and everything else. The honest answer is we don't know yet in the UK. Let's see what comes out later on today. We are working very hard on a coordinated ask across the sector of what support is needed from Treasury. We obviously have done a recent survey of the memberships of SOLT and UK Theatre and the theatre world, and it's very clear that our sector is going to need further support to come out of this. the cash flow progressively becomes an issue as we go through the summer and into the autumn. So just to say, we are working hard on trying to pull that together, both ourselves and also working across the creative industries with Oxford Economics doing a very quick piece of work for all of us on trying to quantify what that ask might look like. There are many ideas out there. We've probably got one go at one coordinated ask, so that is what we are now working on. That is it for today. We will keep doing these on a regular basis for you all. Just to say, we will expect information today. We will update our websites. Please do go on them and get all the links into the different areas. We will look at the bankruptcy thing and going concern things, and as soon as we've got information, include those as well. But for today, that's it. So thank you very much, and please do all take care out there. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.